Hi everyone, welcome to today's vlog, and it's lovely to see you all as we continue to look at this story of prayer with Philip Yancey and exploring what it might be about. And today's little subsection is entitled Aliens, and I wondered, oh my goodness, what was that all about? But in his book, Philip Yancey talks quite a lot about the story of a young lady called Megumi Yokota. And she was a Japanese schoolgirl who was abducted from a beach at the age of 13 back in the late 1990s, and her family searched for her everywhere, and eventually word came out that she may have been abducted and taken to North Korea so that the North Korean Secret Service could learn Japanese and Japanese culture. It sounds all very far-fetched, but it turned out to actually be true. And eventually, some nearly 30 years later, this young lady photos of her were released by the North Korean government to her family, and throughout that time, those 30 years, her family had prayed for her. Indeed, the whole of the Christian community in Japan had prayed for her. And of course, that prayer in some way or other held this young lady, and although she's never actually, to my knowledge, been returned back to Japan, the question is, does she know who she is? Has she become a North Korean citizen? Can she remember her family? Can she remember her country? Can she remember that she was brought up a Christian? The question is, God doesn't forget her, and in that sense she stands with many other characters throughout the history of the Bible who have experienced the same sort of thing, perhaps most notably Joseph being taken down into Egypt by the traders and then brought up in a foreign land. You can think of Daniel in the court of King Nebuchadnezzar and actually going out to the window and praying 3 times a day. And although we may not go through quite such a traumatic experience, the reality is that our prayer life strangely becomes the real reality. So often our world tells us that actually, why do you want to pray for? Because it's just talking to yourself or wasting time. Well, actually it's not. The words of the world tend to want us to focus upon either the world or upon ourselves or upon all manner of other things. Being with God in prayer actually helps us to see the world as it really is, from God's perspective, that young lady, Megumi Yokota, has never stopped being a child of God to God, and he loves her, whether she's in North Korea, whether she's in Japan, wherever she is. And her family praying for her, and indeed the whole Christian community of Japan praying for her, just helps to remind both her and them of that fact, that whatever happens, this is the reality, the true reality. And in prayer we find that, whether it be formally in church, whether it be out here in places like the prayer garden, whether it be in moments when we're ourselves in deep difficulties or whatever, with everything else crowding in upon us, may we know that ultimately we're a child of God and a child of love. And perhaps most poignantly of all, of course, is Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane, when everything must have been huge for him. He knew what was likely to be going to happen. He knew what crucifixion looked like. The story in Luke's Gospel talks about how he actually sweated blood, and we looked at that in the service yesterday. And the reality is, in amongst it all, Jesus found that space to pray, and in that moment found not only the resolve to be able to go through all that he needed to go through, but also that he was loved. He was profoundly loved, and that God would never give up on that love. I know Jesus cries out to God, my God, why have you forsaken me?" on the cross, but in a way that's the voice of humanity the rest of the time. the reality that so often our world calls us to follow. But deep down, he never stopped being loved by God, and that love saw him all the way through to the resurrection. So I'm going to ask George very kindly to put up a song for today. It's called We the Kingdom, by We the Kingdom, and it's called Child of Love. And I don't know about you, but sometimes prayer can have quite a bad press about being quiet and just something very serene. But actually, I find prayer more and more a time of great vibrancy, of great energy, just like the wind blowing in the trees down here today. Not a quiet time in that sense, actually an alive time. And so I hope you enjoy the song. It comes out of Nashville, and it's something that might get your feet dancing. So have a good rest of the day, and may we all know that